This is a true horror story, one that still haunts investigators and locals to this day. A story that proves sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not supernatural, but human. In the quiet Bavarian countryside of Germany, in 1922, stood an isolated farm known as Hinterkaifeck. It was home to an elderly couple, Andreas and Cecilia Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria, her 2 children, and their maid. Life on the farm was harsh, but ordinary, until strange events began to unfold. In the weeks leading up to March of that year, Andreas complained to neighbors that he was hearing footsteps in the attic at night. He searched the house, but found nothing. Soon after, he discovered footprints in the snow leading toward the farm, but none leaving it. Then keys began to disappear. Mysterious noises continued. The family grew unsettled, but they stayed put. On March 31st, 1922, the horror reached its peak. One by one, members of the Gruber family were lured into the barn, likely by strange noises, and brutally murdered with a mattock, a farming tool. Their skulls were crushed. Victoria's young daughter Cecilia is believed to have lived for hours after the attack, her body showing signs of pulling out her own hair in terror. The maid, only recently hired, was slain in her bed. Even the family dog was found tied up, barking desperately. But the most chilling part, whoever the killer was, they didn't leave immediately. Neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the farmhouse chimney in the days after the murders. The animals had been fed, meals were eaten. Someone lived there, among the corpses. When the crime was finally discovered, investigators were baffled. Suspects ranged from disgruntled lovers to enemies to strangers passing by, but no one was ever charged. To this day, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of the most disturbing, unsolved mysteries in history. And perhaps the most horrifying thought is this: the killer might have watched the family for weeks, hidden inside the house, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is the true horror of Hinterkaifeck, a story that reminds us that evil often wears the face of someone ordinary, and that sometimes home isn't safe at all. Some houses never forget the screams that once echoed inside them. This is one of the darkest true horror stories in American history. On June 9, 1912, in the quiet town of Villisca, Iowa, the Moore family prepared for bed after a long day. Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children had just returned from church. 2 young friends, Ina and Lena Stillinger, were invited to stay the night after an evening program. It should have been a night of rest and safety, but by morning, the house was drenched in silence and in blood. The next day, a neighbor noticed that the Moore house was strangely quiet. Curtains were drawn, doors locked. When she entered, she made a gruesome discovery. Inside, all 8 people, Josiah, Sarah, their children, and the Stillinger sisters, had been bludgeoned to death with an axe. The weapon was found in the home. Josiah's wounds were so severe his face was unrecognizable. But what disturbed investigators most wasn't just the brutality, it was the strange details. All the victims' faces were covered with cloth or bed sheets. Mirrors in the home were draped with clothing. A plate of uneaten food sat on the table, and, in one room, a bowl of bloody water was found. As if the killer had tried to wash his hands. The investigation dragged on for years. Several suspects emerged, including a traveling preacher, who later confessed, but his confession was unreliable. Others believed it was a drifter, or someone the Moores knew, yet no one was ever convicted. Today, the Villisca Axe murder house still stands, and is open to the public. Paranormal investigators claim the house is filled with restless spirits. Guests report hearing children's laughter, footsteps, whispers in the dark, and doors creaking open on their own. Many say the house itself feels alive, watching, waiting, remembering. But beyond the ghost stories, one terrifying truth remains: the killer walked into that home, murdered 8 innocent souls, and vanished into the night, never to be caught. This is the true horror of Iliska. Not a ghost story, but the nightmare of knowing evil can strike in the safest of places. And sometimes, it never pays for what it's done. If you dare to hear more true horror stories like this, subscribe to Echoes in the Dark. Some stories don't just haunt you, they consume you. This is the true horror of Hinterkaifeck. In the cold spring of 1922, the Gruber family lived on a remote farmstead called Hinterkaifeck, just outside Munich, Germany. The household was small. Andreas and Cecilia Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, Victoria's two children, and their maid. Life on the isolated farm was quiet until strange things began to happen. Weeks before the murders, Andreas confided in neighbors that he heard footsteps in the attic at night. He searched the house, but found nothing. Soon after, a newspaper appeared on the property that no one in the family subscribed to. Keys began to go missing, and one morning, Andreas found footprints in the snow leading from the forest straight to the house, but none leading back. Then, on the night of March 31st, 1922, something unimaginable happened. The next day, neighbors noticed that the Grubers hadn't been seen in town. The children didn't attend school. The farm animals were unfed, and smoke rose steadily from the chimney. Alarmed, they visited the farm. Inside the barn, they discovered a nightmare. Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia had all been brutally murdered with a mattock, an old farming tool. Their bodies were stacked, partially covered with hay. Inside the house, the maid and the youngest child, 2-year-old Joseph, were found murdered as well. 6 lives, wiped out in one night. What made the crime even more chilling were the signs that the killer or killers had stayed in the house after the murders. The cows had been milked, food had been eaten, and smoke from the fireplace showed that someone lived in the home for several days. With the corpses still inside, the investigation was intense. Dozens of suspects were questioned. Some believed Victoria's troubled relationship with her father, Andreas, rumored to be abusive, and incestuous, played a role. Others believed it was a robbery gone wrong, but money was found untouched in the house. One theory suggested a drifter who had hidden in the attic committed the murders, waiting for the perfect night to strike. Despite years of searching, no one was ever arrested. The Gruber family farm was eventually demolished, but not before locals claimed to hear cries, footsteps, and whispers inside the abandoned house. To this day, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of Germany's most chilling unsolved mysteries. The thought that someone could silently move into a home, live alongside a family in the shadows, and then destroy them all in one night, is true horror at its core. It wasn't a ghost or a monster. It was a human being, and that's what makes it terrifying. Subscribe to Echoes in the Dark for more real horror stories from around the world. Sometimes, the scariest monsters wear uniforms and carry authority. On January 26, 1948, a man walked into the Teikoku Bank in Tokyo. He wore a crisp uniform and claimed to be a public health officer. Japan was struggling with disease outbreaks after the war, so his presence didn't seem unusual. The man gathered the staff, 16 people in total, and calmly explained that he was there to give them an emergency dysentery vaccination. He spoke with authority, handed out cups of medicine, and ordered everyone to drink. The employees obeyed. Minutes later, chaos erupted. One by one, staff members collapsed, violently convulsing. Within minutes, 12 people lay dead. The survivors could barely breathe, paralyzed by the poison coursing through their veins. The medicine had been laced with cyanide, and the man, he calmly collected valuables and money, then vanished into the Tokyo streets. The crime shocked the nation. Who was this man who could walk into a bank, speak with authority, and orchestrate such a calculated massacre? Police suspected a man named Hirasawa Satamichi, a painter with financial troubles. He confessed under pressure but later recanted, claiming his confession had been forced. He was sentenced to death, but appeals and doubts about his guilt lingered for decades. Many believed he was innocent. Why? Because the poison used was so sophisticated that some suspected secret wartime units, even links to biological warfare experiments carried out by Unit 731, Japan's notorious military program. Some whispers even suggested U.S. intelligence covered up the truth during the early Cold War. But here's the horror that chills to this day. The real killer was never truly confirmed. Imagine sitting at your workplace. A man in uniform tells you to drink medicine for your health. You obey, and in moments, your life ends. The murderer walks free. The Taigen incident is not just a crime, it's a reminder of how easily trust can be weaponized, how authority can disguise evil, and how a single person can bring terror without lifting a weapon. True horror isn't the shadow in the corner, it's the stranger who looks official, speaks calmly, and tells you to trust them. Subscribe to Echoes in the Dark for more true horror stories from across the world. What if your dream home was watching you? In 2014, Derek and Maria Broadus thought they had found their perfect home. A large, beautiful house at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey, a quiet, upscale neighborhood. It seemed like the ideal place to raise their children. But just days after closing the purchase, Derek went to the mailbox. Inside was a white envelope with no return address. He opened it casually only to find words that would change their lives forever. "Dearest you neighbor at 657 Boulevard." The letter began. It went on. "I have been watching the house for decades. My grandfather watched it in the 1920s. My father watched it in the 1960s. Now it is my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within its walls? Why are you here? I will find out." The letter was signed simply, "The Watcher." At first, Derek thought it was a cruel prank, but then more letters arrived. Each one became more disturbing. The writer described the Broadus children in detail, what they looked like, even the names the parents had called them in the yard. "I see you've already filled the house with young blood. Have they found what's in the walls yet? The house wants young blood, and it will call to them." Maria and Derek panicked. Someone was watching then, someone who knew their every move. They called the police. Investigators searched for fingerprints, DNA, handwriting clues, but nothing. The letters kept coming. Neighbors were questioned. Suspicion grew. Could it be someone jealous? Someone who wanted the house? Or was it a disturbed local obsessed with the boulevard's history? The Broaduses were trapped in their own nightmare. They never moved into their dream home. Fear consumed them. Imagine being stalked not by a person you could see, but by a presence in ink and paper, words that told you your life was already being scripted by someone else. The Watcher wrote, "Have you found all the secrets the house holds yet? It is old, and it wants to know who will live inside. It hungers for you." The case became national news. Despite investigations, private detectives, and even an FBI profile, the Watcher was never found. The Broadus family sold the house at a massive loss in 2019, unable to escape the haunting presence of someone who knew too much about them. And the mystery lingers. Who was the Watcher? A disturbed neighbor? A rejected beer? Or was the house itself cursed, reaching out through letters, pulling people into its story? True horror isn't always a shadow in the hallway, it's the idea that someone right now is watching you, waiting. Subscribe to Echoes in the Dark for more true horror stories from around the world.